The Los Angeles comedy circuit in the late 1990s and early 2000s was built on a particular kind of arithmetic. More comedians than rooms, more rooms than audiences. More ambition in any given square mile of that city than the entertainment industry could absorb at the rate it was being produced. This is always the condition of the early career in Los Angeles comedy. The surplus of people who want to do the work, exceeding, at any given moment, the available infrastructure for doing it. Open mic nights existed in this arithmetic as the point of entry, the place where a comedian who was not yet anything was allowed to become something, in front of an audience that had often come for reasons other than seeing them specifically, in rooms that were as likely to be half empty as full, for no money and no guarantee of anything except the microphone and the time and whatever the room chose to give back to the person holding it. On the night in question, Katt arrived at an open mic in Los Angeles to find that the room had given back the minimum version of itself. One person. Not one person in the front row, with others scattered toward the back. One person, an individual audience member who had arrived at the room for whatever reasons audiences arrive at rooms, who was now in possession of the evening's full attention and whatever the evening chose to produce. The comedian who had drawn this situation had options. The simplest and most understandable option was to thank the single audience member for their presence and reschedule. Nobody would have blamed this choice. The room does not owe a comedian an audience, and a comedian does not owe an empty room a performance. The transaction is bilateral, and when one side produces one person, the other side has a reasonable case for declaring the transaction incomplete. Katt did not reschedule. He performed the set. All of it. 20 minutes of material delivered to one person in a room built for many more, because the material was what he had, and the microphone was what the room offered, and performing was the thing he had come to do. The 20-minute set that Katt performed for one person in a Los Angeles open mic was not a diminished version of the set he would have performed for 50 people. By the accounts of the people associated with the venue who were present during it, it was the full set, the same material in the same order, with the same commitment to delivery that the comedian brought to rooms that were full. The single audience member, for their part, responded. Not in the way that a crowd responds. There was no collective momentum, no shared laughter amplifying itself across a room. But in the way that a single person responds when they are in direct and unmediated contact with something they find genuinely funny. One person's honest response to 20 minutes of comedy without the social cushion of a crowd or the permission structure of collective laughter. Pure feedback. What a comedian receives from a single audience member who is genuinely responding is, in a specific way, more information than a full room provides. The feedback is unmixed. The laughter that arrives is the laughter of one person who found something funny, rather than the averaged laughter of many people responding to slightly different things about the same moment. The silence that follows something that doesn't land is one person's actual non-response, rather than the variable non-response of a varied crowd. Every moment of the set lands in its true form, without the collective dynamics that modify what a room gives back to the performer who is in front of it. Katt received this feedback in real time for 20 minutes from the only person in the room who could provide it. And what the performance required, what the decision to do the full set for one person rather than reschedule had committed him to, was the willingness to be in direct, unmediated contact with the material's actual quality, as registered by one human being's actual response. not the averaged response of a crowd, the real response of a person. The open mic circuit in Los Angeles was not designed to be inspiring. It was designed to be functional, to provide the repetition that stand-up comedy requires for development in the only form that the development can actually take, which is doing the work in front of live people until the work and the delivery and the relationship between the comedian and a room are all operating at a level that makes the career that comes after the circuit possible. The repetition is the education. This is the single most important fact about the formation of a stand-up career, and it is the fact most invisible to the people who later see the finished version of a comedian performing at the highest level of their development. The 500 open mics that produced the fluency of the special, the 200 half-empty rooms that produced the specific quality of comfort with a quiet audience that a fully developed comedian carries. The dozen nights with one person in the audience that produced the understanding that the work is the work regardless of who is watching or whether anyone is watching at all. What performing for one person requires of a comedian is something that most audiences never have occasion to consider. Because audiences are not single people, they are rooms full of people. And the collective dynamic of a room full of people is so different from the dynamic of a single human being in a chair that the two situations are, for the purposes of what a comedian does, almost entirely different activities. A room full of people has a collective momentum. The laughter in one part of the room gives permission to the laughter in another part. The collective attention of many people reinforces itself in a way that the attention of a single person cannot. One person's attention is just attention, present or not, engaged or drifting, with no surrounding context to sustain it or amplify it. Performing for one person means performing without that collective momentum. It means being funny for a human being rather than for a room, which requires a different kind of relationship to the material and a different kind of confidence in it. The open mic ended. Katt Williams finished the set, thanked the single audience member for being there, and walked off the stage into the ordinary obligations of a working comedian's evening. Whatever came next in the circuit, wherever the next night's room was, the accumulation of repetition that the form requires over the years before the career becomes what it eventually becomes. The single audience member went home carrying something they had not expected to receive when they walked into an open mic with one other person present. Not a polished performance by an established comedian. The comedian was not yet established. The polish was in development. The process of turning circuit work into career-level work was still underway. What they had received was something more immediate and more honest than polish. A comedian performing as though the work was worth doing regardless of whether anyone was watching, because the work was worth doing regardless of whether anyone was watching. This is the thing that is hardest to teach and easiest to see when it is present. The relationship to the work that does not depend on external confirmation to maintain itself. The commitment to the performance in a room that is given the minimum possible reason to perform. The decision to do the full set because the full set is what you came to do, not because the room has earned it, not because the single person in it deserves 20 minutes of your best material, but because the material and the room and the performance are all parts of the same thing, and diminishing any of them diminishes all of them. The career that came after those Los Angeles open mics, the specials, the touring rooms, the arenas, the name on marquees, was built on that relationship to the work, on the specific decision that the full set was worth giving, regardless of who was receiving it. Nobody who sat in a sold-out Katt Williams show knew about the night with one person, but it was there in every performance that followed it, in the quality that audiences describe when they try to explain what made a Katt Williams show different from other shows. The comedian who shows up fully when the room is full learned to show up fully when the room had one person in it. The discipline before the recognition. The performance that nobody was counting.